Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yvonne and I'm the Executive Director of Asia Society Korea. Today's webinar is titled, Now More Than Ever, Shoring Up Afghanistan's Humanitarian Assistance. Since the Taliban's takeover after 2 decades following the withdrawal of the US forces, the situation in Afghanistan has drawn the attention of the world on the evacuations and domestic political fallout. Now the focus is shifting to a much deeper humanitarian crisis across the region. The people of Afghanistan were already in dire need of aid even before the recent crisis. According to the United Nations report, as many as 14 million people, which is more than 1/3 of the population, could not obtain sufficient food in early 2021. COVID is believed to have infected millions. The price of food was on the rise, and there has been severe drought and floods, and harsh winter is soon approaching. Unprecedented number of civilians were killed and injured in the early month of 2021 when the Taliban took over. Now hospitals are overflowing, medical supplies are in short supply, and critical infrastructure has been damaged beyond repair. Moreover, it is imperative that we provide support and protection for children and women in Afghanistan. And it is now the responsibilities of the international community to respond, to urge for support of the Afghan people, and to help secure the safety of these women and children in any way we can. Today's discussion will focus on a range of issues, including what we know about the situation in Afghanistan, how the political actions are impacting the ordinary people in the country, and how we can reduce the human cost of the ongoing crisis, especially on women and children. We have 2 very distinguished speakers with us today. Her Excellency Shinkai Karokhail, former MP and former Afghan ambassador to Canada, and His Excellency Joon, chair of the Save the Children Korea Board. The discussion will last about 35 minutes, then we'll move on to Q&A with the audience. May I please ask those of you in the audience to keep your video off and stay muted to not interfere with the speakers, and please submit your questions through the chat box at any time. Just to give you a simple introduction about our speakers, Her Excellency Shinkai Karokhail is former Afghan parliamentarian and former ambassador to Canada. She is also a rights activist, focusing mainly on the political representation of women and the protection of vulnerable children. She played a pivotal role in opposing the controversial draft Shia family law, which was seen to be oppressing Shiite women and depriving them of many of their rights in a marital relationship. She was also one of the few voices behind the Elimination of Violence Against Women bill, and she attended the Medical College of the Kabul University and graduated with a medical degree. She is also an advocate of breast cancer awareness. His Excellency Joon is a dear and longtime friend of our organization. He is currently professor of United Nations Studies at Kyunghee University in Seoul, Korea. He is also the chair of Save the Children Korea and a board member of the Save the Children International. Previously, he was ambassador and permanent representative of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations in New York from 2013 to 2016, where he served as the 71st president of the Economic and Social Council. Your Excellencies, thank you very much for joining us today. And I have a first question for Her Excellency Shinkai Karokhail. Your Excellency, you left the country on August 20th, 5 days after the fall of Kabul. And some 80% of those fleeing violence since the end of May have been women and children. What does the Taliban takeover mean for women in Afghanistan?
Thank you for organizing today's webinar, and we really appreciate, especially you mentioned regarding the hunger crisis which is going on in Afghanistan. If we really do not address this crisis, will turn to famine very soon. More than half of the population are starving or in a hunger situation. Coming what happened to Afghan women when Taliban took over. Definitely it was a very turning point in our life in a very negative way. Because women of Afghanistan remember those days which they were absolutely excluded from society in the previous government of Taliban. Still women remember those days because you mentioned why I left that on the 20th Afghanistan. Actually, on the 18th, I left the Kabul city. I just entered the airport, spent or wait 2 days and night to take a military flight and leave Afghanistan because I don't feel safe. Because during my position as a member of parliament, more than 13 times I was targeted by Taliban extremist group or many other terrorist group. So I didn't feel safe that if they took over, how they will deal with me. I know that I will be targeted because even on the same day they attacked my house, even they hit my family car with a bullet. And next morning they came to search for me. So none of the women activists, those who work with the previous government or those who work with the media, so definitely those individual, intellectual, none of them, male or female, they were not safe. So that's why most of us prefer to leave as soon as possible before Taliban came after us. So this is what happened. Taliban made so many promises in Doha, and also when they took over, they said, well, women will have their full rights in Sharia, according to Islam or Sharia, or press will have their own freedom, and those who work with the government of Afghanistan will not be interrogated or will be questioned or arrested. But all this was just promise. None of them fulfilled. They did opposite of that. Even like they went to search a house for women who runs the non-governmental organization, took their cars, took their houses. They, I think, not only like searching and looking or torturing and looting the politician's house, but even the activist house, even the non-governmental organization. And many cases where we have those who work with the government, even they announced that, but still they are taken one by one. After a few days, they just kill those guys and just throw their body or send their body back to their family. This is a terrible situation, actually, in Afghanistan. And of course, what happened? They stop even girls above the 12 to go to school. And they just delaying and postponing to make, we are making a system, then we will allow. Which kind of system you are making for girls? Why not for the boys? So what's wrong with it? This is, I think, just the excuses how to make us used to that situation. And finally, they will say, well, we don't have resources or we don't have enough personnel, so the girls cannot go to school. They ban the universities for girls, for young girls as well. They cancel or disbanded the Ministry of Women Affairs and replaced by the Ministry of Vice and Virtue. Also, they shut down the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission. To this fact, they just published the very hard guideline for the media. So this is the way just control everyone. Nobody will be willing to write about them, to talk about the type of crime happening in Afghanistan. So many crimes is happening. And still they say, well, they are the thieves, they are not belong to us. So then nobody's taking responsibility. This is a very severe situation. So then who is coming, using your flag, using your resources, you are using your car and weapons, taking the people from their house and killing, or like taking their money, taking their house, taking their cars. So then say, well, they are not a part of us. I think they don't want to be accountable what they are doing that. So it's really very concerning, very depressing situation for everyone, especially for women of Afghanistan, regarding this hunger crisis. As I mentioned earlier, that so many families, they are selling their house belonging just to make find a food to feed their family. So when it's finished, then what? Unfortunately, we have few cases so far that the head of the family, mostly the man, commits suicide because we're not able to provide food for the family. Another serious issue, which is most of the women, working women, they were the breadwinner of the family. So now they were stopped not to work. So how can they feed their family? I think this is a very serious issue. What's going on and what Taliban want to do with the women of Afghanistan? The world is still silent. The world is just watching, and nobody say anything or nobody clear their position. It's very important. We are really waiting for the world, because before they never listened to us. They thought, well, Taliban changed, Taliban will do this, Taliban will do that. They have an agreement, they're accountable, so on. Especially Pakistan was strongly lobby for Taliban. This is the reality of Taliban. This is how you can see that 12-year-old girl cannot go to school. I think this is really a violation of their fundamental rights. So this was just a few points just wanted to share with everyone. I'm waiting for that any question if those who are willing to ask me. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And I'm sure that it wasn't easy for you to share these experiences. You've witnessed the violence firsthand. And are you with your family now in Canada? Are you safely settled?
Well, not everyone is out. Still have a family there, but yes, a few of us just out of, because one of my sister, which was strong women rights activist, the founder of Young Women's Network, so she's also out. And so two of us, which were time to time they want to target us, we are out.
Mm. Well, according to Human Rights Watch, the Taliban rights record in the 1990s was characterized by systematic violence against women and girls, and as you mentioned, cruel corporal punishments, and including executions, and extreme suppression of freedom of religion, expression, and education. I'm quoting the latest Economist article, Why Nations That Fall Women Fail. Since 2001, infant mortality fell by half. Forced marriage was made illegal, and primary school enrollment of Afghan girls rose from 0% to above 80%. And you mentioned in one of the media interviews that women of today in Afghan are not the same as 20 years back because they are more educated. They're aware, informed, and know their rights. And most importantly, they're educated. So is there any indication that things will be different today for Afghan women living under Taliban rule than they were 20 years ago before US troops went in there?
Well, definitely. If you know more, you will suffer more. Mm-hmm. That's why even the protests were banned from the beginning, and we women didn't have a very nice picture of Taliban. Everybody know that how cruel, how hard are they towards women's issue. Even still, women came on the street and they protest and raise their voice, and they want to say to any kind of violence, and they want fully representation of women in every aspects of life. So that's the difference. That's the today's women are different. Even they now ban the protest. Nobody can protest without permission, take permission from Taliban. Well, definitely now the Taliban will not give. I think women are strong enough. They are going to media, they are giving their statement, they are objecting the Taliban, they are raising their voice inside Afghanistan. And of course, so many strong lobby and advocacy is going on outside Afghanistan as well.
Okay. And I have so many more questions for you, but I will hold on to them later. And I'm sure that our audience has a lot more questions as well. So let me move on to Ambassador O. who is, as I mentioned, chairman of Save the Children in Korea. Ambassador Oh, your organization's global movement launched $25 million of global appeal to meet immediate humanitarian needs and started a petition campaign to urge governments to urgently increase aid to Afghan children. As we discussed earlier, the people of Afghanistan were already in need of aid even before the recent crisis. Therefore, we must ask, why is Afghanistan so vulnerable to conflicts? And what is happening to the children in Afghanistan right now?
Well, thank you very much, Yvonne. And I'd like to thank Asia Society for organizing this event. Actually, I have prepared a short PowerPoint presentation. So if you allow me to share it with you. Let me use my PowerPoint. I hope all of you can see it. Can anyone respond?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's great. Well, I'd like to start by giving you a little caveat that the first half of this presentation is based on my previous experience as a South Korean ambassador to the United Nations, while the other half is from is as a chair of Save the Children Korea. I'm saying this because the Save the Children International does not have its views on the first half of the issues I'm dealing with. Why is Afghanistan vulnerable to conflict? I think Ambassador Shinkai knows better than I do about this, but we need to start with Afghanistan's geopolitical location. Afghanistan is surrounded by countries like old India, Iran, which was once Persia. Both of them were empires. Russia in the north. You should remember that countries like Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, all of them used to be part of the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and China on the east. So you can really call this part of the world at the crossroads of big powers. We sometimes call the Korean Peninsula as being in such a situation when it comes to geopolitical, analysis. But on the western part of Asia, Afghanistan is certainly in this situation. Afghanistan's ethnic composition is complex. You can see this as a result of its geopolitical situation, where it is at a crossroads of these great powers. But that, whichever way you cut it, you see it. Afghan has Pashtuns who are Sunni Muslim, Tajiks, Uzbeks, Hazaras. Hazaras are Mongolian descendants. If you look back, 7 or 8 centuries back, then we all know that there was a Mongolian invasion all of Asia and also part of Europe. If you look at recent history of Afghanistan, in 19th century, the country was under British influence. And in the 20th century, most part of the 20th century, there was an Afghan kingdom. And the king was driven out in 1973, and the Republic of Afghanistan was established. But very soon, the communist force in Afghan society took over. You probably remember the politician named Najibullah and his forces. They were supported by the then Soviet Union, and there was Soviet interference in 1989. There was civil war, and things were very complicated. And then in this, through this civil conflict, the first Taliban government came to power in 1996. They ruled for 5 years. And in 2001, as you know, there was a 9/11 terrorist attack. The United States, suspected Al-Qaeda and asked the Afghan government to provide assistance, which the Taliban government refused. And then the U.S. started war in Afghan. And even though the war was over within several months, the new Afghan government has been struggling to have control over the Afghan territory for the last almost 20 years until the United States decided to withdraw. Actually, the decision was made during President Trump's time, but was executed by President Biden this year. And then the Taliban came to power for the second time. You can see Afghan as the way I see it, as a kind of three issues. First of all, is an international conflict. The country has been influenced by international, struggle for power struggle for many years, as I explained earlier, due to its geopolitical situation. But since 2001, the Afghan government was struggling to get control of the whole country, which was not easy. And along with the failure of the Soviet Union in the 1980s, I think Afghanistan remains a typical case of failed intervention by great powers. Perhaps you remember President Biden, recently said, he was defending his decision to withdraw the U.S. troops, and he was saying that I have never been of the view that we should be sacrificing American lives to try to establish a democratic government in Afghanistan, a country that has never once in its entire history been a unified country. So that was showing, I think, President Biden's dilemma as well. As Ambassador Shinkai already, gave us her testimony, during the first Taliban rule from 1996 to 2001, there were a lot of human rights violations, and the Taliban imposed strong restrictions on women, performed public executions, and prevented international aid from entering the country. So this time around, the spokesperson for the Taliban was saying that they would not repeat what they did 20 years ago, but there is a lot of concerns, and the whole world is watching. The third, we can see the Afghan issue as a question of terrorism. United Nations Security Council report as recently as in June this year said large numbers of Al-Qaeda fighters and other foreign extremist elements aligned with the Taliban are located in various parts of Afghanistan. This report is not from 20 years ago. It's from June. It was in June this year. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, the only leverage the international community may have over the Taliban is their desire for international recognition, which must be used to insist on an inclusive government, respect for human rights, and the suppression of terrorism. I kind of agree with Secretary General Guterres, because what he's saying is to to take advantage of this situation for a more, positive development in the future, rather than trying to contain the Taliban government right now. We can induce or we can pressure the Taliban government to move in the right direction. That's what, UN Secretary General was saying. Finally, I want to say a few words about, humanitarian assistance with a focus on what Save the Children is doing in Afghanistan. I'd like to start with a little bit of history of humanitarianism. Probably you already know about it because it's very relevant. What we can call humanitarian action started with, institutionally started with the Red Cross movement, initiated by Henry Dunant, the Swiss businessman in the 19th century, when he witnessed battlefield slaughter in Italy. And, his idea was there should be a kind of neutral space, a neutral player, so that this neutral humanitarian assistance provider can intervene and provide help to, for example, soldiers who fell in the battle. Whichever side this soldier belongs to, this neutral humanitarian workers should provide the help. That was the idea and was accepted by a lot of people. And in the 20th century, of course, you remember Nansen, the Norwegian humanitarian, kind of legend, Fridtjof Nansen, who got Nobel Peace Prize for his work. And he created an organization which can be called as a precursor to UNHCR, UN High Commission for Refugees, during the League of Nations time before the Second World War. And Save the Children was also the first non-governmental organization in the world that was created in 1919 by a British woman, Eglantine Jepp. She didn't go to Germany or Austria, but at the end of the First World War, she saw photos from Germany and Austria, which was losing the war. And she realized that a lot of children in those countries were starving to death because the country was under black blockade. So she went out to Trafalgar Square in London and she appealed to, London citizens that, look at what we did to these German kids. So we need to help them. It doesn't matter if their country is our enemy. The children are children. Children are our future. So we need to help them. She was arrested for that, actually, and she was sentenced guilty, and she was fined £5, British money. And the judge who sentenced her guilty realized what she was talking about made perfect sense, and the judge paid the fine, £5. That was the first donation to Save the Children. So that's how Save the Children came into being as well. And right now in Afghanistan, Save the Children International, Afghanistan country office with 2,000 staff members has supported communities and protected children's rights across Afghanistan since 1976. So we have been there more than 40 years. Considering how these humanitarian initiatives started, whether it's Red Cross, whether it's refugees, whether it's Save the Children, our spirit is that, when it comes to people who are in humanitarian crisis, it doesn't matter what they do, or it doesn't matter what their nationality is, what their religion is, which side they belong to. It doesn't matter. We just help them. That's humanitarian. So humanitarian approach is a little different from human rights. If you are a humanitarian worker, if you see a terrorist soldier who who has fallen to the ground, you just help him, bring him to the hospital. But if you are a human rights worker, you wait until he's recovered. And when he's recovered, you bring him to justice. So that's the difference between humanitarianism and human rights. Last year, Save the Children in Afghanistan reached over 1.7 million people in Afghanistan, and with health, education, child protection, nutrition, and livelihood. After violence escalated during the last several months, the operation has been temporarily suspended, of course, and Save the Children International is carrying out thorough security checks to ensure that both male and female staff will safely be able to return to work. From mid-September, the country office restarted life-saving services in Kandahar city, in the south of Kabul, starting from delivering essential health and nutrition services for children. So the country, Afghanistan, is in dire need of humanitarian assistance. So this chart shows the humanitarian needs that exist in Afghanistan. And Save the Children Global Movement launched $25 million of global appeal to meet immediate humanitarian needs there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador O, for the very thorough presentation. And I have a question about more policy side. You've been a career diplomat, and you served as the 71st president of the Economic and Social Council at the United Nations. What types of policy recommendations would you have for the governments around the world in order to assist with the humanitarian efforts?
So during my presentation, I quoted UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and I kind of said that I agree to what he said. The second Taliban government in Afghanistan this time has a lot of people, having concerns about their new policies. If these policies are same as 20 years ago, then that's a great source of concern for all of us, like Ambassador Shinkai also told us. So we hope they're different this time around. But how do we make sure that they are different this time? So it's not an easy question. But what Antonio Guterres said was that, let's not act on the basis of our, presumption, because we want them to be different this time. And then we can utilize the Taliban government dire need to get international recognition as a leverage to ensure that they are different this time around, better human rights situation and their severance with the terrorist forces in Afghanistan and in the region.
Thank you. And I would like to actually go back to and ask question to MP Shinkai Karokhail. Your Excellency, as Ambassador O just mentioned, we're really hoping that Taliban's actions will be different than before. But do you think that they will be able to keep their promises? Do you think we can trust their promises?
I think Taliban need more pressure to really keep their promises, because those who are strongly internationally that lobby for them, they have to work with them to to remind them, and they should keep their promises. But one thing we shouldn't forget and really want to mention is the negative influence or leverage Pakistan military and the intelligence which has over Taliban. They are giving very wrong advice. They try to even they fully support them until they fight against the government or Islamic government of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Now, when they went in power, now they try to really isolate them internationally, and the Taliban will be totally dependent on Pakistan aid, support, advice, transit corridor, whatever they are looking for. I think international community should really put enough pressure on Pakistan, sanction Pakistan to stop working with such a regime, and you try to give them a very wrong advice the way the Taliban doing today. You see, even they are not opening the commercial flights that people can come and back, Everything just stopped there, and they try to strongly lobby for those money which is so far freeze internationally, and Taliban doesn't have access to that money. And of course, that money is not for paying their salary or to do their own daily activity. So Taliban, I think, to keep Pakistan away from such a influence and leverage, that I think Taliban will learn how to deal with international community, because they cannot live just by their own self, So, of course, they need a fund, they need a technical support, they need aid. There's so many things which really Afghanistan needed. And I think any country wants to work with the Taliban, they should remember one thing: how to prioritize the human rights issue, the women's rights issue, the minority rights issue. This should be the core of the discussion with the Taliban, because otherwise they cannot stay the way they're doing, So the negative influence which Pakistan has, that should be like a stop. That's the way. And also regarding the crisis, which we mentioned, that how this hunger crisis is really serious, that aid should be like a center of concern as soon as possible. But of course, we again want to mention that we don't want this aid should be distributed to Pakistani agencies or government of Pakistan. Those aid should be sent unconditionally, because the winter is coming very close, and there are so many areas that we could not supply or send the food and non-food stuff to them. So there's so many non-governmental organizations, aid agency, UN agency, they could distribute this aid, of course. And that's more important. Who should be like the worker and the employee should be male, woman, and men both. And that's very urgent, and that's very much important.
And for those of us who have not been to Afghanistan, how severe is the winter in Afghanistan?
Well, because now, especially air transport almost is not working anymore in Afghanistan. Most of this air transport, unfortunately, were damaged by U.S. military as well. And there's so many roads will be blocked by heavy snow, because some of the health stations or some of these districts in the winter, the road will be totally blocked for 2-3 months. So that's why, because the country is very much badly affected by drought, especially 22 provinces. And also there's the COVID issue, definitely there's a political, economic crisis, all affect very badly the economic situation in Afghanistan. And most of, because of the conflict, the war, most of the people and business people, they took their money out of Afghanistan. So even we don't have like this cash money in a bank, and even the banking system is totally collapsing. So that's why we need to how activate back our banking system, and how to reopen the international community should help us to reopen the airport for the commercial flights, for the cargo, and also the other corridors should be used to send this aid to Afghanistan. And it's really, as I said, if you do not really address this hunger issue now, it will turn to famine very soon. And then it will come very much back.
So, Ambassador O, as you know, we are an American organization. So, do you think that United States can still work with the Taliban on Afghanistan and improving the situations in Afghanistan?
Yes, I think not only United States can still work with the Taliban government, but also it is very important for the U.S. government, to play a role there. Even though the Biden administration decided to withdraw U.S. troops, that's not the end of the story, I think. That's just the beginning of a new story, because we have to live with Afghanistan under the Taliban rule. It's not like, this country is now out of our control. Let's just forget it. You cannot do that, People exist there. So that's why I said, organizations like Save the Children, for them to be able to restart their work there is very important. Whatever comes in terms of Afghanistan's governance, in terms of how the Taliban government will establish itself or not properly establish itself, whether or not the new government will be more forthcoming on issues like human rights promotion or severance with terrorism, that all of that we will have to see. But whatever happens, they need the people in Afghanistan who are in dire situation. They need humanitarian assistance. So we should make sure that there is an environment there for NGOs and, Save the Children is not the only one. There are many other international humanitarian organizations. So it is important for them to start their work again in the country so that they can help people. But at the policy level, of course, the U.S. also needs to continue to play a role. They might go along with, advice given by Secretary General Guterres, we can use the need for Taliban government, their need for international recognition. We can use it as leverage, but they might go for that, or they might be tougher than that. They might first go for kind of containment, and they might try to contain the Taliban government first, and then try to talk to them later. But it's all how you play it out. Countries, when it comes to foreign policies, they have their way of playing the card. Also, we shouldn't forget that China is another factor. China is in a position to provide help to the Taliban government, probably better than any other government. So we want, if China does that, we want it to be positive for the future developments. We don't want it, to be negative. Like, for example, the Taliban government becomes another North Korea, closing all the relations with the outside world, which is not good for the country, which is not good for the people there as well. So all of these factors should be taken into account, and the U.S. should continue to play a key role in dealing with new Afghanistan.
Thank you, Ambassador O. And we obviously put this webinar together because we couldn't just simply sit back and watch what's going on in Afghanistan. We really believe that we had to do something to help the women and children in the region. And we have questions coming in from the audience, and this question is just appropriate. What advice do you have to those seeking to support the women and children in Afghanistan or any trusted charities? So perhaps Ambassador O, would you like to go first?
So what advice to the organizations?
Yes, do you have seeking to support those? Do you have, what advice do you have to those seeking to support the women and children in Afghanistan or any trusted charities?
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Well, they can, if they are ordinary citizens, they can help, people in Afghanistan indirectly by supporting organizations, NGOs, humanitarian workers, humanitarian organizations in the world, like Save the Children, for example, in their work. But they can also, if you are a U.S. citizen, you can talk to your government, you can express your views to your government about its future Afghan policy. Right now, I think the U.S. government is probably in serious consideration of its new policy options towards Afghanistan, and it could be a good time for U.S. citizens to express their views about it. I think that you cannot fly to Afghanistan and help them, so that's probably what they can do right now.
And MP Karokhail, the next question is probably something that you might be able to help with. And the question is, when dealing with oppressive regime, what is the right answer? Internal resistance or external pressure, diplomacy or force? What are the incentives in play for international powers?
Generally, I want to answer that like Mr. Ambassador said, that we don't want another North Korea. Pakistan is already turned to North Korea. If you do not stop Pakistan, it will harm the entire world by creating multinational terrorist group, train them, equip them, brainwash them, and use them against Afghanistan and India's stability. So those international terrorists will harm everyone globally. So Pakistan is another North Korea, and I don't know why nobody is noticing. Even like the head of the intelligence, ISI, Hamid Gul, one of the TV interviews said, we beat Russia by the support of American resources, and also we beat American by their resources. So that's why he wants to get a national credit for that. Pakistan is already North Korea. The failure of Afghanistan twice is just because they are grouping, they are brainwashing people, they open the religious madrasa, they're producing the foot soldier and send them for jihad or fighting inside Afghanistan and plus in India. So that's why Pakistan should be really controlled, because working with the Taliban will not be that much effective if we really sanction over Pakistan, especially on military and the intelligence. That will. Working with the Qatar, which is have a close relation with the Taliban. Working with the China, which China should understand for their own one road, one belt. They cannot go with the government, type of government what Taliban has, because they have their own Muslim community issue inside China that will be an issue for them one day, because they need a different democratic government which really believe on equality, human rights issue, the proper development in a country. So it's better to pressurize or advise or get the support of those who have a good relation with the Taliban and have a leverage over Taliban. But Pakistan have a very negative leverage, and that should be stopped. So this is the way that the international community can work with the Taliban. And of course, I think we need a approaches. International pressure is very much important because now the cabinet have more than 16, 17, they are in a blacklisted, in the blacklist of National Security Council, even in the FBI, So how international community should tell them that how we can help. So these people are like already in a notorious place. How can they respond to that? Or where are the of Afghanistan? And how you can violate the children's rights, like the access to education. Muslim countries, Saudi Arabia should work. This is not the Islam they want to implement in Afghanistan. That's the only political Islam. Pakistan just send it to Afghanistan because Pakistan is willing to have a woman prime minister once, but they are not willing or happy to reopen the girls' school for 12 years old girl. So this double standard policy, the double standard Islam, which Pakistan tried to implement through their supporter or those who were trained or brainwashed by Pakistan, that won't help anyone because. This is we need international pressure. We need, of course, support of civil society. We need the support of media inside Afghanistan. We need to support non-governmental organization, aid agency, people's movement. So how they can help themselves and how they can help the other inside Afghanistan. So we have to strengthening the active civil society activists and aid workers, non-governmental organization, media agency. So this is the way the help could reach there, and also how to keep the people hopeful and alive. They shouldn't go for more economic crisis. Then I think the Taliban can do anything, and also stop the hand or cut the hand of interference, invisible hand of Pakistan from Afghanistan. Afghanistan will stand by its own. Taliban will realize how to deal with the international community and will understand how to work with international. Turkey could work with the Afghan government. Qatar could work with the government. Saudi Arabia could work. Multi-international stakeholders, they could work on UN agency, UNAMA could work to make them understand. But as long as they have the support of Pakistani military, they won't listen to anyone. We need to stop Pakistani military interference in Afghanistan.
And the last question goes to both of you. And this is definitely something we should take into consideration. What if the Taliban government refuses certain types of aid and help from the international community? And if something like that happens, what should be our next steps?
Well, definitely Taliban will not reject any assistance because they really need that. They won't reject.
And now, Ambassador O, we really hope. Yes.
Taliban could not even feed their own personnel, which they brought them from mountains. And even they could not pay their salary. Everything just dropped in Afghanistan. Definitely, yes. They are in a dire need, for that.
Yes.
As I agree with Ambassador Shinkai about your question just now, I have another question. I think he or she wrote this to me only, and which says, for Ambassador Joon, how do you evaluate South Korea's humanitarian assistance for this Afghanistan situation, especially comparing with other countries? Can I answer this?
Yes, absolutely. That person must have sent it directly to you. So I didn't get that question. Okay.
Well, I didn't have time to talk about South Korea's role during my presentation. But actually, South Korea played a role in this process as well, because right after the Afghan war in 2001, we sent our troops to support the U.S. troops, I think in 2003 or 4. And later, some of the Korean missionaries were, killed by the terrorist groups in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, I think in 2006 or 7. And, yeah, and then we withdrew our troops, but instead we sent civilian workers to assist their nation rebuilding, including by running a hospital in Bagram, Afghanistan. So South Korea also played a role, and this time around, I think we should be more forthcoming in assisting the people of Afghanistan. We should remember that when we are helping out there, when we are providing humanitarian assistance, we are helping the people. I'm emphasizing people because sometimes there is a situation where we want to help the people, but not necessarily the government. In some cases, we have such a situation. But what is important is to provide humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan. And I'm glad that the South Korean government raised its budget for humanitarian assistance quite a lot this year. I think probably for the first time in many years. So I hope, a good part of it will be used for people in Afghanistan.
Thank you. And we have a lot more questions from the audience. I have a lot more questions, but unfortunately, we have to end our program here. And Your Excellencies, a big thanks to you for taking your time to join us today. And we will continue to keep those women and children in our prayers. And we'll continue to do all we can to provide support at the organization's level. And thank you to all of you in the audience for joining us from all around the globe. We co-organized this webinar with our colleagues in Asia Society Southern California as a part of Asia Society's ongoing Women Empowerment Initiative. And I will now hand over the mic to my colleague, Anjali Sharon, the Executive Director of Asia Society Southern California. So thank you again, Your Excellencies. And Anjali?
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, for this presentation this evening, and to Yvonne for moderating this excellent conversation. It's a privilege always to work with Asia Society Korea Center. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank our promotional partner, the Afghan American Community Organization, and also to highlight that there will be another program organized on October the 6th on the crisis in Afghanistan, hosted by Asia Society Northern California. So we encourage you, if you enjoyed tonight's presentation, to tune into that as well. And we'd like to advise you to please consider making a donation or joining Asia Society as a member, or make a donation to support us. We make these programs free to the public, and your support allows us to keep on doing that. So thank you very much for tuning in this evening, and we look forward to seeing you at a program again soon. Good night.